Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're looking at something I think is really interesting, and that's psychological safety in team sports. We've all heard that phrase,
Yeah.
right? But what does it actually mean?
Basically, it's that feeling of knowing you can speak your mind,
Hmm.
share ideas, even take a risk or two on the field.
Without being afraid of getting benched.
Exactly, yeah. Without fear of punishment or humiliation.
Yeah, it's kind of like having that trust that you can make mistakes, you can try new things, and your teammates and your coach have got your back.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is that it's not just about creating a warm and fuzzy atmosphere.
Right.
There's growing evidence that this psychological safety can actually impact a team's performance.
You're right. And for this deep dive, we're really focusing on the role of the coach
Yeah.
because, let's be real, coaches have a huge influence on the team's culture.
Oh, for sure.
So we're taking a deep dive into a recent study published in the International Journal of Sport and Exercise Psychology by Ender Schenel, Sophia Jawed, Alhana de los Uluri, and Renzo Kirkumbo.
Great group of researchers.
Yeah, and this study really digs deep into the connection between a coach's behavior, how safe the athletes feel, and whether that relationship between the coach and athlete is the glue that holds it all together.
Yeah, I think sometimes people think it's all about, be a nice coach and everything will be fine.
Right.
But this study suggests it's way more nuanced than that. It really highlights that the coach-athlete relationship is a key ingredient.
Well, you know me, I love a good analogy.
Mhm.
So is it like a recipe where you've got your basic ingredients, but then there's that one secret ingredient that takes it to the next level?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. You've got the coach's behaviors, right?
Yeah.
Could be supportive, could be controlling, but then the relationship is like that special spice that can either enhance the flavor or completely overpower it.
Okay, so let's break down those ingredients. First, tell me about the athletes in this study. Was it just a bunch of basketball players from one team?
Oh, no, no. They actually had a really diverse group, which I think is a strength of this study. We're talking 295 Turkish athletes from a whole bunch of different team sports.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Football, basketball, volleyball, handball,
Okay.
even cricket and American football. So quite a range there.
So it wasn't just focused on one specific sport.
Right, exactly. And I think that suggests these findings could apply across the board, not just to one particular team dynamic.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So how did the researchers figure out what was going on in these teams? Did they follow them around with cameras and microphones?
Not quite. I mean, that would be pretty interesting.
That'd be a great reality show.
Oh, yeah, but for this study, they used questionnaires to get a sense of the athletes' experiences.
Okay.
So, the athletes answered questions about how they perceived their coach's behaviors, both the supportive and controlling aspects.
Right. So they weren't just relying on the coaches to self-report.
Right.
They actually asked the athletes what it felt like on the ground.
Exactly. I mean, the coaches probably think they're doing great,
Right.
but how are the athletes actually experiencing it? So, yeah, they asked about that. They also had the athletes rate the quality of their relationship with their coach, like, how close they felt to them,
Mhm.
how much they trusted them. And then, of course, they asked the athletes about their own sense of psychological safety within the team.
So it sounds like they really captured multiple perspectives on this whole psychological safety thing.
Exactly. They tried to be really thorough.
Well, I'm guessing those supportive coaches created a totally different vibe compared to the controlling ones.
You would think, right? And the study definitely found that to be true. When athletes saw their coaches as supportive, encouraging them to take ownership of their training, believing in their skills, and making them feel like an important part of the team, those athletes reported feeling way more psychologically safe.
It makes sense, right? If you know your coach has your back, you're more likely to try something new.
For sure. I mean, you're not going to take risks if you think you'll be punished for every little mistake.
Right. But I'm willing to bet the flip side is true, too.
Definitely. If the coach is like a drill sergeant,
Oh, yeah.
all about control and winning at all costs,
Yeah.
yeah, that sense of psychological safety just tanked. Like the athletes felt suffocated, like they couldn't breathe.
So even if a coach thinks they're being tough but fair,
Mm-hmm.
it really boils down to how that behavior is perceived by the athletes.
Absolutely. And how it affects the team's overall atmosphere.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to that secret ingredient, the coach-athlete relationship.
Yeah, so did the study find that it really did make a difference?
Oh, it definitely did. That relationship was like a volume knob on those coaching behaviors.
Oh, I like that.
It could either amplify them or soften them.
I can't wait to hear more about this volume knob analogy.
Well, let me tell you, it gets even more interesting. So when the coach-athlete relationship was strong, It actually amplified all the positive effects of supportive coaching.
So that psychological safety was even stronger.
Way stronger. It was like that trust and connection really allowed the athletes to, fully benefit from all the encouragement the coach was giving. And you know what's really interesting?
What's that?
A strong coach-athlete relationship, it actually mitigated the negative effects of controlling coaching behaviors.
Wait, really? So
Yep.
even if a coach is being a little bit, overbearing or controlling,
Yeah.
if there's that strong relationship there, it kind of softens the
Just
blow,
like a buffer
like a
almost.
shield.
Yeah.
So the athletes still feel safe, even if the coach is, maybe being a little intense sometimes.
Exactly. And it's not just about the coach either.
Oh.
One of the things that I thought was so interesting about the study was that it showed the athletes aren't just, passively receiving whatever the coach throws at them.
Right, they're not just sponges.
No, they're actually co-creating that safe space through their own efforts to build that relationship with their coach.
Okay, hold on. That's a pretty big deal, right?
Huh.
Because we often think of the coach as the one setting the tone.
Yeah, like they're in charge.
They're calling the shots. But you're saying the athletes have a role to play, too.
Absolutely. They have agency in this.
So if an athlete's feeling kind of stifled or like they can't really speak up, they're not just stuck waiting for their coach to magically change.
No. They can actually do something about it themselves by focusing on building a stronger connection with the coach.
That's really empowering.
I know, right? And it goes both ways. If a coach really wants to build that kind of environment where athletes feel safe to take risks, to be themselves, it's not just about, not being a jerk. It's about actively investing in those relationships, showing your athletes that you value their input, you trust them to make their own decisions.
So it's almost like a dance, this back and forth.
Yeah, exactly.
Both sides are contributing to the feel of the team. This research was done with Turkish athletes.
Right.
Do you think it would be different in other cultures? I mean, would these same things hold true in, say, Japan or the United States?
That's a great question. I mean, the idea of psychological safety itself, I think that probably transcends cultures. But you know how different cultures have different ways of interacting,
Oh, yeah?
different norms and expectations? It'd be super interesting to see if those cultural differences affect how this all plays out, in terms of coaching styles and how athletes respond.
Like maybe in some cultures, it's more common to have a very hierarchical coach-athlete relationship,
Right, yeah.
while others might be more egalitarian.
Exactly. So many different possibilities. I mean, it makes you wonder, what about psychological safety outside of sports?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Like in workplaces.
Or schools.
Yeah, even families. Like, do these same principles apply?
I think we could talk about this for hours.
We totally could. But let's
Yeah.
bring it back to the study for a minute. What's the biggest takeaway here for our listeners? I think the main point is that psychological safety, it's not just some fluffy, feel-good concept.
Right.
This is about performance. It's a key ingredient for individual athletes to do well, but it's also essential for the team to function at its best.
Yeah.
And the really important thing to remember is that it's not just the coach's responsibility.
It's a two-way street.
Exactly.
Coaches have a big influence, but the athletes are not just along for the ride. They can really shape that environment too.
Through those relationships, it's about working together.
It's like the coach might lay the foundation, but the athletes bring the building blocks.
Yeah, I love that. It's a collaborative effort.
They work together to build something strong.
And that building, that's a safe space where athletes can really thrive. They can take risks, they can try new things, they can push themselves.
And that's how they grow and improve.
Exactly.
But it's not just about winning medals, right?
Right.
There's a human element here too.
Oh, absolutely. Psychological safety is about well-being, too. When athletes feel safe and supported, they're less likely to, get burned out or struggle with self-doubt.
Makes sense.
They're probably going to enjoy the sport more, feel more connected to their teammates.
It's like you're creating this whole positive spiral.
Exactly.
And I know we've been focusing on sports, but these ideas,
Yeah.
they're making me think about all the other areas of life where psychological safety matters. Like, what about workplaces, families, even whole communities?
Ooh, yeah, that's a really interesting thought. Imagine if more workplaces had that kind of environment where people feel safe to speak their minds, to challenge the status quo.
Yeah. Imagine if people could admit they made a mistake without being afraid of getting fired.
Right. I bet you'd see more creativity, more innovation.
More collaboration.
Exactly.
And families. Can you imagine what it would be like if parents could create that same kind of safety at home?
Oh my gosh, I know.
Think about it. Kids who feel comfortable expressing their feelings, talking about their struggles,
Yeah.
asking for help when they need it, without feeling judged.
That's a beautiful thing to think about.
And if we could scale that up, I mean, what if our whole society embraced this idea of psychological safety?
Yeah.
Can you imagine what that world would look like?
It would be incredible. It would be a world where people could have these tough conversations, bridge divides, work together to solve problems.
Without all the anger and aggression we see so much of.
It's a vision worth striving for sure. And this study, it's a reminder that psychological safety, it's not just this abstract idea, it has the power to really change how we interact with each other and to create these spaces where everyone can thrive.
I'm totally inspired. But before we get too carried away, let's be real. Every study has its limitations. What are some things we should keep in mind about this one?
Yeah, it's easy to get excited about research like this, but important to remember every study has its limitations. Right. And the researchers were really upfront about those limitations. One of the big ones is that this was what's called a cross-sectional study, meaning they collected all the data just once at a single point in time.
Got it. So it's kind of like a snapshot,
Yeah,
not a video.
exactly.
So we see the correlations, like, okay, supportive coaches tend to have teams with higher psychological safety. But can we really say with absolute certainty that one caused the other?
Well, that's the thing. We can't.
Right.
Because it could be, like you said, just a snapshot in time. It might be that the team was already feeling pretty safe, and that's why the coach was acting in a supportive way.
Or there could be some other variable that's affecting both.
Exactly. Something we haven't even thought of.
So to really know for sure, we'd need a study that follows those teams over a longer period, right?
That's right. A longitudinal study.
Follow them for a whole season or even multiple seasons and see how things change over time. Now, that would be
Yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah, to see, do those teams with high psychological safety, do they maintain that advantage over time?
Right.
Or what about teams with coaches who, start out being more controlling?
Could they change?
Yeah. Do they adapt their style? Does that team dynamic shift?
And how does that affect their performance and well-being as the season goes on? Some questions.
Right.
Okay, you mentioned earlier that another limitation was that this study only got the athletes' perspectives.
Yeah.
What about the coaches? Don't they have something to say about all this?
I know, right? I would love to see a study that also includes their voices.
Because they probably have some interesting insights.
Oh, I'm sure. Like, how do they define psychological safety?
Right. What do they think it means?
Yeah, and what are the challenges they face when they're trying to create that kind of environment?
I bet they have some stories.
Oh, yeah. And you know what else would be really cool? To compare how coaches perceive their own behaviors
Uh-huh.
with how the athletes are actually experiencing those behaviors.
Well, there might be a mismatch.
I'm sure there would be, in some cases at least. And it's a good reminder that, look, even if a coach has the best intentions,
Yeah.
they might still have some blind spots.
Right.
We all have biases.
For sure.
We all make assumptions about people that can definitely shape how we interact with each other.
Whether we realize it or not. So it's important to just keep checking ourselves.
Yeah.
To ask for feedback.
Be open to different perspectives.
And this study gives us a great starting point for those conversations.
Yeah.
A framework for thinking about psychological safety.
It's like a common language we can use to talk about all of this, to identify those potential problems and work together to find solutions.
Like a roadmap.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's up to each coach, each athlete, each team
Right.
to figure out what works for them.
Exactly. And that's kind of the exciting part. This is just the beginning. There's so much more we can learn about this.
So many more studies to be done, so many different approaches to coaching and team development.
Mm.
It really feels like a whole new world of possibilities has opened up.
I know. It's inspiring.
We've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the coach-athlete relationship, that idea that athletes can help create their own sense of safety, and all the different ways these principles might apply in other areas of life, beyond sports.
Yeah. It's been a great discussion.
This has been an awesome deep dive, and a huge thank you to Hinder Schinel, Sophia Jowett, Elhan Adalusalari, and Renzo Kirkombo for their amazing work on this study.
Yeah. It's given us a lot to think about.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, but I hope this conversation has inspired you to think a little differently about psychological safety and its power to transform teams, workplaces, families, and even our communities.
Yeah. And remember, everyone deserves to feel safe to be themselves.
That's a great message to end on. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.